All right, if you want to go ahead and take out, we'll talk about it eventually, your little statue dude from on page 27. And then we're also going to look at pages 23 through 25, I believe. Nope, just through 24. 23 through 24, all the cross-references they did from Genesis, from Psalms, from Isaiah. So we'll look at that also. But we're definitely going to look at our little guy here that they put. When I first did this in 2013, they changed it. They hid this thing in the back of the book in a sealed envelope, like this huge chart with like all this stuff already done all over it. They put it in the back of the book, and they told us it was there in a sealed envelope, and they told us we couldn't open it until they told us to, which was like at the very, very end. And what it was basically all the answers for everything that they wanted us to do here, which is why they didn't want us to do it ahead of time. And I expected this grand revelation, and I open it up, finally when they told me to open it up, and it's just this little guy. So I thought, well, that's kind of odd. But it did have a lot of really useful information that I know that these books don't have, because they don't have little secret envelopes in this one. And so I will make sure when we're finished with these first 6 chapters that I'm going to go ahead and copy it off for you guys so that you can, so you'll have it. Alrighty.
This little dude you're gonna.
No. This one is done like this way, but it has like all the the times and what all the things
So that
mean.
you're gonna copy off for us.
No, I'm gonna copy off. It's in my other book.
Oh.
No, it's
Okay.
what was in the secret envelope. But no, this little dude wasn't. He didn't get a secret place. He was just blank for us to fill out
Alright.
all of our secrets. Alrighty. Just as a review, we learned last week that God told the Israelites how they were supposed to live. And of course, they were disobedient. So they went into captivity for 70 years. And we also talked about a few weeks ago that the 70 years was significant because they had missed their Shabbats. They have not given the land their Sabbaths every 7 years. So therefore, that was where the 70 years came from, but that is not why they went into captivity. And we talked really a long time last week about why they actually went into captivity. And for a really, really good list of 20 reasons, 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 7 through 17, tells you all 20 reasons. We learned in chapter 1 that the sons of the royal and the nobles were being educated to basically be good Babylonian kids. I mean, they were stripped of their name, they were stripped of their religion, they were stripped of their knowledge, really. They started teaching them their own history, their own language, their own doctrines. They gave them names to honor their own Babylonian gods. So they were basically trying to break them down, their Jewishness, and then build them up to be really good Babylonian boys. And we talked about the things that God gave, because God, you see a lot of giving and granting throughout the book of Daniel. And we talked about in chapter 1 that Daniel gave the king of Judah and some of the temple treasures to Nebuchadnezzar. He gave Daniel and his friends favor with the commander. He also gave them all 4, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, all manner of wisdom and understanding. And then he gave Daniel the gift to interpret dreams and visions. So, now we go to chapter 2. And it would probably help. I don't have my Bible.
Oh, well, that would be.
No, it's over here. Yeah, it would be.
Seeing as it's a Bible study.
It would be very helpful if I had my Bible out and turn to Daniel. See, Daniel chapter 2. Sorry about that. Alrighty, I should have known I had too much space up here. Alrighty, our time phrase. When did chapter 2 take place? When did this happen?
In the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign.
Which would have been about what year? Anybody?
Second year was like 6. Nebuchadnezzar 605.
603.
603.
603. Now, if this is only his 2nd year, what does this seem to say about Daniel and his friends? How long were they supposed to be educated?
3
3
years.
years.
So if this is his 2nd year, what does it look like then?
They're not done educating them.
They're not done educating. But, there had to be a big but, right? Remember last week when we talked about the accession year and how the Babylonians and the Judeans actually count when the king actually became aware? They start the first year from. All right. What's counted in here as Nebuchadnezzar's first year? That was actually his accession year, was in 605. So his actual first year of reign was not 605. So his second true year was actually 603. So the 3 years that the boys would have trained was 605, 604, and 603. So during his second year, they'd actually been there already 3 years, because his accession year would have been in 605. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, clear as mud, right? And if you want a cross-reference for that, it's 2 Kings chapter 24, verse 12. And that just puts Nebuchadnezzar's 8th year of reign as 597. So when you do the math, it shows that that was his actual accession year. So this had to have been right at the end of their training. I mean, right at the very, very end of their training. So this had to have pretty much occurred real close to chapter 1. What language is chapter 2 written in?
Not Hebrew,
Not Hebrew.
so Babylonian,
Which was what?
Greek?
Aramaic.
Aramaic.
Aramaic. Now, what I wanted to show you up here was that in the Babylonian, in the Aramaic sections, in language, this is how God is referred to. It's referred to as El, which really is not very specific. It's just like all gods could be El. So we've kind of claimed Elohim as one of God's names. It's not really his given name. Elohim could be any range of gods, could be any kind of gods. Pagan gods, our God, it doesn't matter. So this is a very generic term for a god. So when you look at the Aramaic section, it's just El. It's a very impersonal word.
That's L?
For God, yes, it's El. It goes this way. It's El. And then Elohim. However, in the Hebrew sections, where it's written in Hebrew, they refer to God as this. This is the Tetragrammaton, which we pronounce Yahweh, which actually is unpronounceable. Yod-He-Vav-He. This is God's covenant name. This is the name that God gave himself. This is his personal name. So when Daniel writes the sections in Hebrew, then he is using God's covenant name, God's unspeakable covenant name. But when he's writing it in Babylonian, when he's writing it in Aramaic for the Babylonians, he uses the very generic El to mean just a God, a very impersonal El for God. And why he chose, ask him, I don't know.
For his readers.
Well, yeah, because he's writing for his audience, which is really odd, because when Nebuchadnezzar claims the God of Daniel, he's claiming, Yahweh, he's claiming the personal God, but he still considers him just one of. Yeah, one of. Just a very impersonal one of. So that's just kind of your bonus for today, for tonight. All right, in verses 1 through 11, what's going on in our scripture?
Another dream.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar has a dream.
Nebuchadnezzar, his very first dream that is recorded for us. And what's his dream about? Well, first of all, the word for dream, halam, which I have on your papers, that could mean any kind of dream. It could mean a dream like I go tonight and I have a dream, or it could mean an actual prophetic dream. So it's just a kind of a generic term that could mean any kind of dream. And that troubled, when it says that dream troubled the king, that pa'am, I don't know if your son ever did this, but we had one who just liked to, Mom, what? Mom, what? Mom, what? I don't remember. Then it would start again. Mom. That's what that troubled means. That is that persistent tapping that just impels you, that just agitate you to no end. So that dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, that he obviously thought it was a prophetic dream, that it was a dream that meant something, just was tapping, and he just couldn't get out of his head. He was just agitated by it because that's all he could think about. It would not get out of his head. So he wanted to know, what in the world could this dream actually mean? So, being Nebuchadnezzar, being the Babylon, who did he call?
Magicians,
Yeah.
astrologers, sorcerers,
Yeah.
and the Chaldeans.
And the Chaldeans, his astrologers, his sorcerers, his conjurers, he told them, he brought them all in. But there was a catch.
Yeah, he wasn't going to tell them what he dreamt.
Yeah, he wouldn't tell them. Not only were they supposed to tell him what the dream meant, they first had to tell him what the dream was. And they couldn't do it. As a matter of fact, twice in verses 4 and verse 7, they begged him, please tell the dream to your servant and we'll declare the interpretation. But you got to tell us what it is. And did Nebuchadnezzar cave?
Nope.
No, he didn't. As a matter of fact, what did he tell them was going to happen if they didn't do it?
We're going to get chopped up.
Yeah. If they were able to do it, they were going to have all these amazing rewards, curses and blessings, even from Nebuchadnezzar. If you could do what I need you to do, all these blessings are going to be yours. But if you don't, and if you can't, all the curses, not only to you, but to everybody in your house. And your house is going to be wiped out. And the summary of their predicament is really verse 11. So would somebody read verse 11? Because this is their answer and this is their whole predicament.
It is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh.
Yeah, they said, you know what you're asking for? We can't do it. And as a matter of fact, nobody can do it except the gods, and the gods aren't here. The gods don't dwell here, the gods don't live here, the gods don't talk to us. We can't do it, and they're not telling us, so, problem solved, not our fault. But is that how Nebuchadnezzar responded?
Nope.
No. Look in verse 12. How did he respond?
Angry.
He was angry.
Yeah, he was angry. And in his anger, what did he order happen?
That all the wise men should be slain.
Yeah, he was ready to kill them all. Everyone, and who would that include?
Daniel and his friends.
Daniel and the four. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's who was going to die.
That's a little over the top.
I think so.
I mean,
He's king.
He had a temper. He had a temper. I would think so too, unless, I don't know, how long does the faucet have to drip in the sink before you are just ready to rip out the whole sink? I mean, really, and if it's that constant agitation, and he wasn't sleeping, he wanted this told to him, nobody could do it, nobody would do it, and to him maybe, verse 11 is what made him so mad, because it's like they're giving an excuse. They're giving an excuse why they can't do it. What the heck did he hire them all for? Why are they all living there? What is their job supposed to be anyway? And if all you can give me is a bunch of excuses, since I guess really he can't fire them, well, I'll just kill all of you then. Since none of you can do it, we'll curse on all of you. And go find them all and kill them. What I find in stark contrast to that is look at 14, and how did Daniel react? With discretion and discernment. He didn't get angry. It doesn't even say that he tried to run away and hide. They were looking for him. He probably walked right up to him, and when they say his bodyguard, that's actually his executioner. That's the person who Nebuchadnezzar sent to go execute everyone. But Daniel answered them with discretion and discernment. Daniel didn't get all upset about it. And that discretion, the etah, is counsel, with wise counsel. It's the only time it's ever used anywhere in Scripture at all. But he answered with good counsel, and that discernment, that to him is good taste, good judgment, a good report, and a good command of himself. So he didn't go and get in the guy's face. He didn't try to fight him off. He didn't try to, to find
Plead for his
excuses of his
life.
own. Do what?
Or plead for his life.
Yeah, he didn't. He went and he answered with good judgment, with a good command of himself, self-control, and he went to him and he talked.
Which I find this curious that, he was really young still. And then now it doesn't say that he specifically asked the king, but the king was asked to give him time so that he could answer his dream.
No, look at 16. So Daniel went in and requested of the king.
So he did go in.
He did go in, and he did ask. But where else do we see Daniel acting with this discernment and this discretion and this respect?
With the Mede, Darius.
No, backwards.
Oh, with the prison guard to say, hey,
Yeah,
give us.
because he didn't demand anything. He said he went and looked for permission. He didn't just go and decide to stage some kind of a hunger strike to prove his point. He didn't rile up everybody else to kind of have this thing where they were all going to starve to death and the guy was going to get killed because he couldn't get anybody to eat anything. He went and he asked permission. So again, we see Daniel acting with this respect while the king is acting in absolute indignation and fury. And even the poor, Arioch was like, wait a minute, hold on. Not Arioch. What was his name?
Yeah, Arioch.
No, the commander of the officials back in chapter 1. He went to him and said, look, can we please do this? Just for a little while. Give us 10 days. What's 10 days out of 3 years? Really. It's nothing. Give us those 10 days and then check us and see. And if we're not at least as good, if not better, we'll go back and we'll do it the king's way. What a lesson this is for us as believers about how we should treat certain situations and certain people. That while we're looking at their indignation and their fury and their anger and maybe even their viciousness or them trying to get back at us, if we go to them with discernment and discretion and respect, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against these things, there is no law.
And it also goes with the old saying, better or easier said than done.
Yes. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I just have to look back to this afternoon to tell you it wasn't easy. But what a reaction from, like you said, from a 17 or from a 15 or 16-year-old. I can tell you, well, yes, we have all of them out of that 15 to 16-year-old range. But none of my children would have ever acted this way. And we know that it has to be from God. His whole attitude has to be from God. Because none of us, being told that somebody's coming after us to kill us for something somebody else could or could not do, without ever given a chance to see whether we could do it or not, would not react with discretion and discernment and respect.
Yeah, it's all an attitude. It's like, even, when people are railing at you, if you have an attitude of love and compassion toward them, even though they're hating you, it makes a difference in how they can lower the temperature.
It can. Well, and what the scriptures say also, when you go about doing good, then when they start to say bad things about you, everybody else can look and say, no, they're not. No, they're not. I'm not saying it always happens, but, but scripture said, they can't really talk about you when you're acting with the right attitude. And the right attitude does not come from within our own human selves. It can't, because that's not who our humanity is. It has to come from a right attitude with God. And then that attitude flows through. So, now we have poor Daniel, and he walks right up to the captain of the guard, who's been charged with killing him. He walks right up to him, and he asks why is this decree so urgent? Why are you in such a big hurry to kill everybody? And the guard told Daniel what had happened. And instead of that, the guard turning around and killing Daniel, Daniel actually goes into the king. And what does your chapter 16 say that he requested?
Asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation.
That's what I have. I have give him time. In the original language, it's give me an appointed time to come back. So not you give me time and I get to decide when I come back or not. And so, when I figure this out, I'll come back and tell you, which could be, 50 years from now. He went to the king and he said, listen, you tell me when I can come back. You tell me, how urgent is this? How quick do you want me to come back? And that's when I'll come back and tell you. That's impressive to me. And obviously the king told him he could go, and the king told him when he could come back, but we don't know how long he gave him. But the king gave him an appointed time, which becomes very, very interesting in just a few minutes. So Daniel went home to his house, and he told his friends about what had happened. And what did they do? Who actually did the requesting? Who did they request it from? And what did they actually request, starting in verse 17?
They sought God.
Yeah.
They sought the mercies of God.
Yeah.
Looked like all of them did, that they might.
I'm sure they all kneeled and started praying and...
How does he refer to his friends in chapter 17?
To his companions.
As companions? But what names did he give them?
Wise men of...
Hananiah,
Oh, yeah.
Mishael,
Yeah.
and Azariah. He went back and referred to them as their Hebrew names. Nowhere else that I have found did he do that. All the rest of the time, it's Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. And he refers to them as who they are, even though this is in Aramaic. So he calls them by their actual given names, which are God-honoring names. And he asks them for compassion from the God of heaven about a mystery. That mystery is mysterion. And it's not something that, like, I love to read mystery novels, or I like to watch mystery shows. This is actually something that is completely out of range of unassisted natural comprehension. These are things of God that we absolutely are incapable of understanding. And it's only known by divine revelation in a manner and a time that is appointed by God. So God is only going to reveal these mysteries when He's ready to do it, and He'll do it in a way that only He will do. So I think it's very interesting that Daniel asked the king for the appointed time when Daniel could come back, but who was really in charge of the time?
God.
God. And he says that in verse 21. It is He, God, who changes the times and the epochs. The epochs. So God is the one in charge of the time. So the king might have said, you have 2 days to come back to me. But Daniel, in his very godly thinking, is God will reveal this to me in God's time. And let's just pray, it's within the time frame that the king gave. But God does His appointed time. God's clock does not run on our clock. His time frame, even though we would wish it did, does not run on our time frame. So we may say that this needs to be done by this time, and this needs to be done by this time, and this needs to be done by this time, but God is the one who appoints the times. We don't. We don't get to do that. And so His mysteries, these things that we can't comprehend without His intervention and without His explaining, that's not for us to know until God says this is the next step. This is the next step. And in Scripture, and I don't know where it's found, maybe somebody can look it up real quick, it says that, man makes plans, but God appoints the times. God appoints the path. And this is the same thing. Daniel had a job. He knew it was very quick. I mean, time was short, or he was literally going to run out of time. And so were all these probably hundreds of men, and maybe even their families, because he threatened their families. And now he's saying, but you know what, God, reveal this to me in your time, in your way. And yeah, so he and his friends, I can just see them falling on their faces, because it says right there, they did it. They asked for compassion, so the king would not destroy Daniel and his friends with the rest of the wise men of Babylon.
It's like they didn't care about the other wise men?
I know that's what it sounds like, right? So kill those pagans, leave us alone. But yeah. And so the mystery was revealed to who?
Daniel. And
Only
night.
to Daniel. They all prayed, but only Daniel got the revelation. Only Daniel was shown what it meant. I got to think, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, because I remember, and this is going to come later, but, was it Gabriel or Michael said, Daniel, you have found favor, you are, what does it say?
Yeah,
like,
you found favor with God. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much, yes.
That's almost like, Mary when he says you found favor with God among all the women. It's sort of like,
Which is interesting, because when you look, when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were actually tested by fire, literally, they held true to their faith. They held true to God. They even said, God will save me, but if he doesn't, know this, we won't bow down to your idol.
Yeah.
We won't do it.
Like I said, there's some things there's other things that are worse than death.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like eternal death.
Yeah, like dying without Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be bad.
What is it to gain the world and lose my soul?
Yeah.
What the world gives us, the world can take, but what God gives us, nobody can
Well,
take.
is that the only two places in the Bible where it says that you have been found, you have found favor with God?
I don't
to
know.
Daniel and to Mary?
I don't know.
Because I don't remember anybody, not even Abraham. I mean, I know it said
Enoch
Abraham was a friend of God, and David was after God's own heart. But nowhere else have I read where it says, you have been found favor with.
I don't know. You'd have to look up what it actually means, because this would be in Aramaic. The other would be in Koine Greek. You'd have to see what those two words actually mean, and then do like a massive cross-reference for any other word that means that may have been mistranslated or translated not to mean favor.
Okay. Anyway,
So
what were you gonna
enjoy.
say?
That's your homework for next week. We enjoy your report. We look forward to it. Make sure to make enough
Hey,
copies
Google.
for everybody.
Cool.
So there it is. Yay! So there it is. All right. So somebody, then Daniel, after he's given the revelation of this vision, which is just an appearance. It's a Kesev, but it's just an appearance, and it's used in Daniel 12 times, but nowhere else in Scripture is it ever done. So Daniel uses it quite a bit.
What, the night vision?
The vision, yes, the word vision, the Kesev, which is on your paper, is only used 12 times in the entire Scriptures, and all 12 of them are within the book of Daniel. So not even in Revelation do we get that same word. Now it may say in English vision, but it's not the same word as what would be in Daniel.
Yeah, because didn't Ezekiel have some visions?
He did, but it's
And even Paul had a vision.
but they're all but they're just different words. So it's not that there's not other visions. It's just that word is not used anyplace else, which means an appearance. So the appearance of what he saw. And then Daniel says a really, really great prayer. But what I want to concentrate on is, Oscar, will you read verses 20 and 21?
Daniel said, "Let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. It is he who changes the times and the epochs. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to the wise men and knowledge to men of understanding."
What does this, verse 21, he removes the kings and he establishes kings, and he gives wisdom to wise men. What does that sound like? that sounds like, to me, the entire theme of Daniel, that we get that the God Most High is over the realms of men, and he bestows it to whomever he pleases. And how interesting is it that he says, specifically prays that God removes kings and establishes kings, and he does it after God reveals what that statue means. So Daniel, when he's praying this, already knows what that statue means. And he's giving God all the credit for removing the kings and establishing kings. That's interesting. To me, it's interesting. So, we know that the mystery was revealed only to Daniel, even though they all prayed. And what else does Daniel's prayer in verses 20 through 23, what else does it say about God?
He can reveal all mysteries, light dwells in him.
That he's the one that controls all things and grants all wisdom.
Yeah. He reveals the profound and hidden things, which would be those mysteries. He knows what's in the dark, but only light lives in him. He's the God of our fathers. And yeah, he acknowledges that God is the one who gave him all wisdom and power. And then we get, in verse 23, even now you have made known to me what we requested of you. How do you think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego felt?
Relieved.
Do you think, though, that they ever felt like we're here just kind of riding his coattails, but we're good guys too?
I don't think so. I'd be like, good, you go tell the king.
We'll be here packing our bags. We're going back. We're running away from home.
If you don't come back, we're moving. We're leaving.
We're done.
We're escaping.
We are out of here. Verses 27 and 28 are in absolute agreement when we read way back here in chapter 11. Miss Mark, do you want to read verse 27 and 28?
Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the vision of your head upon your bed were these.
In 11, these soothsayers and conjurers and diviners said, the thing that you demand is difficult. No one could declare it to the king except God's, whose dwelling place is not with mortal flesh. Daniel, however, there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the latter days. And here's your dream. He's absolutely agreeing with what all the magicians said, and he doesn't even know it.
And not only that, but to me, he's kind of like, I don't want to say brown nosing, but he's propping up the king because he's having this dream directly from God, revealing to him. And he just didn't know how to interpret it, but he was giving him the dream of what was going to happen
in the end days. Who was the future revealed to in chapter 7 through 12?
Daniel.
Daniel. Who was the future being told to now?
The king.
Nebuchadnezzar. I found that very interesting.
But see, oh yeah, it was the whole thing, wasn't it? Because it's a statue.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
God revealed to a pagan king exactly what his plans were all the way through unknown history to Nebuchadnezzar and even into the latter days, even into the end times. That's very interesting to me.
Only so his name could be praised through Daniel, though.
Oh yeah, but that is very interesting. Because while he's doing this, now remember, 7 through 12 are kind of interspersed in between here.
Well, he uses this king, and to all along. I mean, he's like God's little pawn.
He does.
He uses him, to punish the Israel and take these people into captivity, and
But also to
and
really
he blessed
reveal,
them as a nation while all this was going on.
and to reveal himself to them still in a pagan nation. Because remember, deity stayed in the land. And this is God showing up very much saying, I'm here too. I'm not back there. Nobody defeated me. All these gods did not defeat me. I'm still right here. And I'm still the one in charge. And I'm still the one who's giving. And nothing in here ever says take. I'm the one giving. I'm the one granting. I'm the one revealing. It's right here. I'm the one doing it. And I'm still with you. I'm still here. Through this little young kid. I'm still here.
And I think in a way it allowed God to be revealed to that nation, because this Hebrew that is a slave and was captured is the one that, was able to reveal this through God. And so he found favor with Nebuchadnezzar, made him high. The common folk have to be like, maybe there's something to these people, you know?
And where else do we see this happen? Look at Joseph.
Yeah.
Look at Joseph.
Yeah, in Egypt. Mm-hmm.
Who had all these bad things happen, and yet every time it seemed like he was going to get a step up, he got knocked back down, step back, got knocked back down. But the whole time he was knocked down, he was still learning things that he needed to know, so that when he finally got to go before Pharaoh and interpret his dream, he would have all the skills necessary to do exactly what God needed him to do at that appointed time.
Like, not only for the land, but also it's got to be for the people that were in captivity. Has God forgotten us? And, well, no, because look, here is one of our people, and, God is still speaking through them.
And
so it's
remember,
got to give them a little hope.
At this time, at part of this time with Daniel, they also have Ezekiel. Ezekiel is there too. Going way off the deep end, but Ezekiel's there too. So Daniel's not the only one. So it's like Daniel is in one spot. God put him in one spot for a specific purpose, and he put Ezekiel in another spot for a totally different purpose. But it was all to serve the same purpose. Does that make sense? Mm. Just in two different ways, in two different sections, I guess you could say. But yeah, so why in verse 30 does Daniel even say that he was even given the interpretation?
So that you may know the thoughts of your heart.
Yeah. He says, I didn't do it to prove that I have any wisdom more than any other living man. I didn't do it to show you how smart I am, but for the purpose of making you the interpretation known to the king, so that you can understand the thoughts in your mind. That's it.
See, there again, he's bowing to the king, rather than saying, look how smart I am. He gives deference to the king,
Yeah, but I mean, in a way, if you can look at it another way, it's kind of like he's being respectful, but he's also saying, hey, you don't even understand, what you're feeling or what you're thinking. I'm not wise, but God's giving you this interpretation. Because can you see where it's not really a compliment, but a little put down? Because, hey, so you can understand the thoughts of your mind. Because, you would think, hey, don't tell me what I think. I know what I know,
Well, but he obviously didn't, because he asked all his wise
Right.
Yeah. But can you imagine how easy it would be at this point for Daniel to be arrogant?
To be puffed up, yeah.
Yeah,
to say, you know what? Y'all better be glad, because I just saved your lives. You're welcome. Just saying. You know what? Maybe you need to get out of my way, because you're only here because I'm the only reason you're alive right now, so just part ways. How easy that would be. He was a teenager. How easy would it be as an adult? To walk around with all these men who are supposedly so smart and have been in Babylon, raised to these positions. We're looking at maybe 3, maybe 4 years into captivity, and Daniel just saved all their lives. It'd be easy to get puffed up, but I just see humility in all this. I see humility. So then we get to our little dude. And you can pull out your little dude picture. Your little I
dude.
guess he's not a dude. I guess he's
A little dude picture.
our little
I didn't write
statue.
it.
Our little statue dude right here. Our little picture. And we are not going to get too far into it. It would be very easy, but we're just going to do what's in Scripture. So in verse 31 through 35, this is when Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar what the dream is. So the first part of the statue was what?
The head was gold.
He had a gold head, and then the next part was a what?
So,
Silver's chest and arms.
It was his chest and his arms, and this, I mean, obviously we don't know what the arms were doing, but, so what was his belly to his thighs?
Bronze.
Bronze, and then we had
Legs of iron.
legs, yeah.
iron,
And feet
and
of
then what
clay.
we had feet, not only of clay, but what were they?
Iron and clay.
Iron and clay. And then we had something else, kind of stuck off to the side that was kind of weird for a statue, and what was that?
Stone.
It was a stone, the rock. So, starting in 36, he tells him exactly the interpretation of this dream. So up at the top, this head of fine gold, who is that?
Babylon. So that's Nebuchadnezzar.
Well, and Nebuchadnezzar, specifically Nebuchadnezzar. And what does it say that God gave Nebuchadnezzar? In 37.
Basically rule over everything. I mean, he's the ruler over everything.
He gave him the kingdom,
The beast of the field.
power, the strength, the glory, yeah, everything. He gave Nebuchadnezzar
A
sovereignty.
lot of power, yeah.
He gave him sovereignty. He made him sovereign of everything, wherever people are, wherever animals are, which is very interesting for his next thing that happened. But yeah, wherever these things are, God gave them to you, Nebuchadnezzar. But then something happens in verse 39. And what happens?
What?
Another kingdom
Another-
arises, inferior.
An inferior kingdom. Can you imagine Nebuchadnezzar, who's just been told that God gave him a kingdom and power and strength and glory over everything that he sees, but this inferior kingdom is going to come and take me over? How could any kingdom come and take me over, let alone one that's inferior? Then who comes next? Still in verse 39.
Another kingdom of bronze. Oh, wait, no, we did that one.
No, the bronze kingdom, the third. And what will the third kingdom rule over?
Over all the earth.
All the earth. Not just what you can see, Nebuchadnezzar. So their kingdom's going to be even bigger than yours. It's going to expand out even further to cover the whole earth.
Oh, yeah. Alexander the Great. Okay.
Then he mentions specifically the 10 little toes on the feet in verse 42 through 44. And what's so different about these feet, these toes? I guess you could jump up to 41.
Some of it will be strong, and part of it will be brittle.
Yeah, so it's a divided kingdom.
Kingdom and
It's part strong, part not strong, part weak. And in verse 43, how is this kingdom built? Won't you read 43 for us?
And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. So it looks like the people groups are going to mesh, but they're not going to be united into there's not going to be a melting pot.
In Aramaic, it actually means that these kingdoms will cement their alliances by intermarriages, but they will not stick together. So we're going to see some intermarrying going on, some intermarrying going on, and so it's going to make the kingdom weak. It's going to be partly weak, partly strong, but they're not going to last long because you can't mix iron with clay. When this common clay is like mud, you can't mix those two together. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to hold. So they're not going to hold either. Then we get to whose kingdom? In 44.
And 44. Jesus.
We get in God's kingdom. In the days of all those kings being these 10 little kings for the 10 little toes, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed. And that kingdom will not be left for other people. It will crush and put an end to all the kingdoms, but it will endure forever. How was this stone cut? How was the stone?
From the side of the mountain.
From the side of the mountain. Who made the stone?
God.
God. Because it says it wasn't chipped out by hands. Nobody carved out the stone. The statue, yeah, because men tried to build it. The stone was cut without hands. And once it crushes and destroys, what does it do?
Establish his own kingdom forever.
And it grows into a big mountain that covers the whole earth. That covers the entire earth. We looked in your homework on pages 23 and 24, we did a lot of cross-references about the rock, about mountains. We looked at Psalms, we looked at 1 Peter, we looked at Isaiah 28, and I'm going to pull mine right now. So what did we learn about stones? Particularly this stone, but it was stones.
Well, the stone usually refers to the Messiah,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it?
And God called Jesus the chief cornerstone,
Yeah.
who was rejected by the builders, and who would the builders be? Who would the builders have been represented by?
The Jews.
The Jews.
Yeah, the Jews.
Yeah.
Right, who didn't believe, but who is he still a cornerstone for?
That for
Believers.
Yeah, for us and to believe, exactly. For those of us who believe that he's choice, he was tested, he was costly. It also says that we as believers, we're living stones, that we're going to be built into a spiritual house as a holy priesthood. What does the stone do to unbelievers? What is the stone?
Stumbling stone.
Yeah,
Stumbling
it's
block,
a stumbling block
Rock of offense.
and a rock of offense. Can you imagine being offended by Jesus? I mean, we can't. But would it be easy for us to even imagine someone who could be offended by Jesus?
Oh, a lot of people.
Yeah, I was gonna
Oh,
say.
yeah. It's not hard to see why they are offended by Jesus, but to me it's hard for me to I guess agree with their offense of why they're offended.
Yeah, to understand it.
Yeah, we don't understand why they're offended.
We understand it, but we don't understand it.
Yeah, I'm like, I get where you're coming from. I get why you could be kind of upset about that, but why would you want to be upset about that? That doesn't make any sense.
Did you hear about the commercial that they played right during the Democratic
No.
debate?
Does it have to do with this?
Well, talking about being offended.
Oh,
It's
okay.
an alliance of people for unbelievers that don't believe in religion. And you know what their last tagline was? I don't mind living in hell.
Oh my gosh.
This was brought up on the Rush Limbaugh, because if not, I would say, oh, that was fake. But you know, when he brought it up, and then I was like, and guess who the spokesman was? The son of Ronald Reagan.
Oh, that's kind of scary.
Well, I was gonna look it up. I forgot to
But-
tell you earlier.
So they actually said,
Ronald Reagan said that?
Yeah.
I don't believe
so
that.
it said, we don't mind living in hell. You know
Was
what?
he the moderator? He was.
No. He was just that commercial for the group. He
So
was
he-
not. He was a moderator. I'll look it up and show it to you.
But wow, that's
Michael
kinda
Reagan.
scary.
We're talking about Michael Reagan.
Not the guy that has a radio show, but
The other son.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
Wow. But that's, wow. If you notice, these metals, as you go down, the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, and then the iron and the clay. As you go down, the strength of the metals actually increases, but the value decreases. Because gold obviously is more valuable than silver, bronze, iron, or iron and clay. But silver and bronze and iron are much stronger than gold.
Mm-hmm.
So the strength actually increases, but the value of each metal actually decreases. Also, when the stone crushes the statue, how does it get crushed?
Completely.
It gets crushed from the bottom to the top. Which I know that it's probably not any way connected, but it reminds me of the veil when it was torn from, I know it was torn top to bottom, but it's not the way, I guess in my head, it's backwards. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking
Well,
backwards.
this says, in verse 40, it says, the iron that crushes the kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly clay and partly iron, the kingdom shall be divided.
But
It sounds like
clay,
it sounds like the stone broke the iron and that shattered everything.
everything else up above it, and that's, because I'm looking and I read.
Verse 40.
Yeah, I'm seeing it in verse 40, but I saw, hold on, I'm trying to see, because I know I saw where it said that it came, oh shucks. And then the iron, the clay, up in 35. The iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were crushed, and that's backwards. The iron, the clay, then the bronze, then the silver, then the gold were crushed all at the same time and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So, I don't know, I guess to me it seemed like if you crush the bottom of something, then the rest of will just kind of topple down.
Yeah.
But this, it's like it's methodical, like it went up, like it crushed the iron, then the bronze and the silver, then the gold. Maybe I'm just thinking weird in my head, but alrighty. Let's look. Somebody want to look up Micah. Micah chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. This was not in our lesson, but it's actually, Micah's actually quoting Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 and 3.
I had trouble finding Micah. 'Cause I
Micah.
always want to say Malachi. It's not Malachi.
Daniel.
It's Micah.
Micah 4, you said?
Micah chapter 4,
I looked it
verses
up.
1 through 3. Daniel, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah,
Jonah,
and Micah, Nahum, and
Jonah.
Habakkuk. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, and he is quoting Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 and 3.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, if you got it.
Yeah, you got it. You read it.
And it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and the peoples will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, Come, and let us go to the mountain of the Lord, and the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For from Zion will go forth the law, even the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between many peoples, and render decisions for mighty distant nations. Then they will hammer their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they train for war.
And that's because we have peace.
Yep,
We have peace.
eternal peace.
We have eternal peace. So has this happened yet?
Oh, yeah.
No. No, not quite.
Yeah.
No. And so we have the mountain of the Lord, the mountain of the house of the Lord, and then if you jump up to verse 12, it talks about the mountain of the temple. So, here's another picture of the rock that's becoming the mountain, and covers the whole earth, because it says it's raised above all the hills, and the people are going to stream to it. The nations will say, let's go up to the house of the Lord.
Which is funny, it says, let's go up.
Yes, up, because he's a mountain. It's on the mountain, let's go up. Do you remember we danced that song, come, let's go up to the mountain, come, let's go up to the Lord? Okay, I won't sing anymore because it's really bad. And it says, he will judge and render decisions for mighty distant nations. Is that not what this rock did when it started crushing all the nations? Did it not? Is that not a picture of judgment against the nations? Yeah, of course it is. And what's so, in my brain, who does God compare unbelievers with in the end times in the book of Revelation? Babylon.
Yeah, Babylon.
Babylon. Babylon the Great.
The harlot.
Babylon. So, yeah, it's almost like, as he's crushing upward, then it's kind of, God, the believers, and Babylon, the unbelievers. And so they're kind of literally, I guess, head to head. But then God eventually crushes all of it. And then his kingdom is established forever. So it's a great picture for those of us who know kind of the rest of the story, what's going to happen. Now to Nebuchadnezzar, he's got to be thinking, wow, I'm the head, I'm not the tail, I'm the head, I'm the gold. But then he sees that it's not going to last forever. Babylon's not going to last forever. Because here's even an inferior kingdom and it's coming next. So this still, even though he probably felt good, that hey, I'm on top, it still probably is very disconcerting to him. Which may be why in chapter 3 we see that, lo and behold, he built his own statue. Coincidence? I don't think so.
He was just trying to rush things along a little, trying to help God.
Yeah, and it just seems like that's kind of a disease that from the beginning. It's just people trying to rush God, saying, God promised me this, so I'm just going to push it forward and kind of help him out, make him do what I want to do, and all it did was just set him back even further. God kept his promise, but he had to do a little discipline along the way. Kind of took a curve in the road, and people had to come back. So yeah. So in 46 to 49, Nebuchadnezzar has this great revelation, actually. He paid homage, which is just a respect in public. It means to worship, but it's not like worshiping a god. It's just he's giving him a special honor, all of this respect done in public. So now the tables have turned. Daniel's been kind of paying homage to the king this whole time, and now the king turns around and pays homage to Daniel. And what does he actually say, starting in verse 47, what does he say about God? Daniel's God.
He is the God of gods and the Lord of kings.
And what else?
And a revealer of mysteries.
Then what did he do? For good old Daniel.
Promoted him.
Yeah, Daniel got himself a promotion.
And many gifts.
And a lot of gifts. So he was a very rich young man in a very powerful position, but he didn't forget his friends.
I think it was interesting he was put over all the wise men.
Yeah. Which again, in my head, would have been a great cause for a lot of puffed upness or a lot of jealousy for them. I'm actually amazed, and growing up, I always thought it was these people who wanted to kill Daniel and throw him in the lion's den because he was so big on himself. That didn't come till way later did they want to get rid of him, even under a different king. Yeah, way down the line, way older. Never does it say that even though he was above them, we're never shown any jealousy. We're never shown any great conspiracies against Daniel, which to me has to say that even though he was above them and even though the king was giving him homage, and even though he saved all these thousands of lives, his attitude was still one of discernment. How is he described? With discernment and discretion and respect. even though in his position, he really didn't have to. And so we continue to see his godly attitude toward everybody. And he's still serving a pagan king over pagan people while still serving God. And doing both with this brilliant balance. Brilliant balance. Because we're going to see next week, Daniel isn't the first one to make the king mad enough to, let me rephrase that, to stand up for himself to the point where he had to choose life or death. Because before he chose, but he really wasn't threatened when they chose not to eat. But he wasn't the first one to have to go through it. We don't even know where he was. And then after this, we never hear about these poor guys again. We don't know what happened to them.
Well, it says he appointed, it said they made a crest to appoint them three, and this time he calls them by their other name.
By their Babylonian names.
Oh, the administration of the province of Babylon while Daniel was a king. So I would imagine they went back to their jobs.
They went back. But isn't it nice that Daniel remembered? Daniel didn't forget his buddies. He knew, even though God revealed it to him, he knew who were on their knees. He knew they were right there with him. He knew they were praying with him. So he didn't forget his buddies. And I don't think it was just because they were good buddies. I mean, these guys stood by him through all of it, but not just to say, oh, Daniel, keep going, keep going, keep going. They really paracleted. They really came alongside of him, walked with him, prayed with him, agreed with him about God's statutes, about what they needed to do to be godly people living in this ungodly land. And we all kind of need people like that in our lives. Not kind of, we really do need people like that in our lives. Who will come up and say, you know what, I got you. I got you, I'll pray with you, I got you, it's all good. And then when things work for us, we need to remember them. Not necessarily get, the king to appoint them to something, but we do need to acknowledge that, you know what? We can't do this without those people who pray with us. We can't do this without the people who are there beside us. We can't do it. Daniel couldn't, and we can't either. And then when these people, these things, these situations come up to us, and it's real easy just to get angry and just to pay, the punch for the punch, we need to remember this little teenage kid and go, no, discretion, discernment, respect. Discretion, discernment, respect. Regardless of their indignity, regardless of their fury, regardless of their anger, their threats, their whatever. Discernment, discretion, respect. And that is all I have got for tonight. Does anybody have anything else that they learned, that they saw?